Recording. Thank you. And share the presentation. Yeah, presentation. Okay. Welcome to the Waco MPO public meeting. Today is February 3rd. We're here at 401 Franklin Avenue. I am Arthur Chambers. I'm Mukesh Kumar.
Daniela Gales. Annette Polk. Nora Roy.
We are getting started at, I think it's like 5:19. So for this meeting, for all the material that you need access to, they can be accessed via this QR code. And along with that, this is also all the meeting material also available at the link provided here at the bottom of your screen. In today's meeting, we're going to go over what the Waco MPO is, what the transportation system performance need to look like. We're also going to go over roadway safety targets as well as public transportation safety targets. And we will talk about the public comment opportunities, followed by any questions and answer session that we might have. So first, who are we? We are a regional planning organization who provide input from all the constituent organizations into what the regional transportation decisions need to look like. We also ensure that regionally significant projects are prioritized in a manner that they could be attached to realistic funding strategies as well as where they stand in the priority list. We also make decisions about how federal highway and transit funds should be used within the region. And we also help the local governments as well as TxDOT in identifying what the regional priorities are. Simultaneously, we also pay attention to what the future transportation network needs to look like, some projections that we do for a 25-year plan, as well as a 4-year programming that we engage in. The federal transportation planning process, this is a diagram that FHWA uses. It goes through this feedback loop in which we begin with regional vision and goals and system performance, the performance management. That's the portion that we will be talking about. But largely it goes through regional vision, setting the regional goals, coming up with alternative improvement strategies, then evaluation and prioritization of strategies. And then we develop a transportation plan, typically our long-range plan that is MTP that we just adopted in January, which results in development of transportation improvement program. And that's when we get into the short-range improvement programming portion of the transportation process. Projects are developed, and when the systems are fully operational, we measure their performance, which provides a feedback loop back into the regional visioning process. So what are we? We cover all of McLennan County, and MPO is required for all urban areas that have 50,000 people or more. We typically engage in trying to coordinate and consensus building to plan and fund all the transportation projects. We have a 20-member policy board, and we also have a 19-member technical advisory committee, as well as 4 work groups. All of them advise the policy board into making decisions about transportation priorities and the projects in the planning area. As we mentioned before, we cover all of McLennan County. So now let's discuss what is transportation system performance. So in this particular case, once the systems are fully operational, we need to have an idea on how the system is performing. And the performance measurement is typically done on the ideas of safety, the condition of assets, and reliability of roadways and roadways for reliability for both roadways and transit. In today's meeting, we are going to be focusing safety for both roadway as well as public transit and the public transit assets, which is covered in the Transit Asset Management, the TAM plan. Next slide. So more often than not, this idea of how the transport infrastructure is performing is only based on ongoing analysis and not just on a single point measurement. We typically continuously analyze the data on an annual or sometimes even more frequent basis, and that helps us understand how could we continually improve our transportation system. The US DOT uses a systems approach in analyzing and evaluating whether a particular program or strategy is on track to achieve its desired outcome. A very clear example, which we will go over in just a bit of detail, is the Vision Zero initiative that the MPO has signed on, so has TxDOT, and in which we try to figure out how translating our performance expectation and to investment strategies, whether they truly result in safer, better connected, and more productive communities. Slide. So for roadway safety, first we'll go over why is this such an important challenge, and then we'll go over what we're doing about it and what some of the targets need to look like. It is a significant public health concern. It's hard to imagine any urban area, or for that matter, any part of the world, anywhere where roadway does not play probably the most important role in connecting the communities, in ensuring that economic activities take place at all. And clearly we use them for all kinds of purposes to live our day-to-day lives. The World Health Organization estimates that we have about over 1 million people die in vehicle crashes around the world, and over 20 million people are injured each year. And these crashes are not only limited to vehicle drivers and passengers, but they are also detrimental to pedestrians, cyclists, and transit users. In the United States, the public agencies often work together to ensure that people do arrive at their destination without incident, which is often the target with Vision Zero initiatives. Next slide. So how do we do and what do we do? We typically not only measure the safety and the severity of crashes, but we also try to make sense of what the underlying factors are that cause roadway accidents, which can relate everything from infrastructure of the roadway itself to vehicle design to human behavior. And based on the analysis and understanding, we recommend practices that have the potential for reducing crashes using all the available tools, knowledge, and technology. Next. So how do we do that? So we measure the safety by the number. We also measure it by rate, typically by per 100 million mile traveled. And we do the same thing for severity of crashes. So we essentially measure fatality, the raw number, as well as the raw number for severity of crashes. And then we calculate the rate based on 100 million mile traveled. We set the performance target to minimize the frequency of crashes for both the overall number as well as the rates. We identify the locations that have demonstrated a history of crashes, and that's typically the case for hotspot analysis. Although as better data come along, better analytical tools come along, we are also recognizing that we often need to go beyond into the system-wide performance. And for the system-wide performances, we also need to make sense of what the demonstrated history of crashes at particular locations are in the wider context of it. And based on that, we prioritize the funding for safety improvements in both our MTP as well as in our transportation improvement program. In Texas, very similar to the rest of the country, these are the following performance measures that we pay specific attention to. Firstly, the total number of fatalities. Then we measure the fatalities per 100 million mile traveled. Then we estimate the number of serious injuries. And then we measure the rate per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. And then we also individually estimate what the non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries are. And in all of these, we try to pay attention to the systems approach so that we can have system-wide outcomes with the understanding that fatality or crashes are not isolated behavioral outcomes, but they are in fact part of how the system overall performs. Next slide. One important understanding that Waco MPO has been trying to include into its discussions of all the planning and programming documents is that it's the environmental factors that influence safety along with the human behavior. And the environmental factors, one of the most important ones that we wanted to highlight in this slide, is the proliferation of stroads all across the United States, and we are no exception to that, in which what we typically notice are that a particular roadway segment functions neither as a street, which is often with slow traffic that identifies people by cyclists in transit first, and not single occupancy vehicle, that emphasizes on the building and the finding gaps and expanding the existing structure, as opposed to roads, which typically have limited access. And they're more focused on efficiently and speedily getting people and freight from one point A to point B. But significant amount of roadway segments in McLennan County also function as stroads, in which they have neither the benefits of street nor the roads, and often result in highly unsafe environment. We typically also pay attention to the location of conflict, including near misses and avoidance maneuvers whenever we have the data available. We do pay attention to visibility that's often available from PRIS data set, and the overall traffic volume, and pay attention to the infrastructure. One of the important items that we are moving toward is to identify how land use contributes to safety outcomes in our transportation system performance. Next slide. So for TxDOT for 2024, the 5-year averages are reflected in this table. One of the items that we would like to point out is that 2025 target is identical to 2024 target, and this is based on TxDOT's TPP division requesting every MPO to either support or modify the 2025 safety targets with exactly the same numbers as the 2024 safety targets. What these numbers mean is that for 2025, we are expecting in the state of Texas 3,046 fatalities, and that will translate to expectedly 1.14 fatality per 100 million mile traveled. We are also looking at 17,000 serious injuries, which translates to 6.39 serious injuries per million mile traveled. We're also expecting 2,357 total number of non-motorized fatality and serious injuries, and the 2,357 is the same number as the previous one. When expressed in 5-year averages, which is typically a better measure for systems performance, since 1-year data may be an aberration, 5-year moving target, moving average is often a better way of understanding how we are expecting it to be better. And we can see that 2025 5-year target is expected to be slightly lower than the 2024 target. According to the BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, each year's target has to be lower than the previous year target, regardless of what the total amount of vehicle mile travel projections might be. Next slide. But that's for the statewide target. For McLennan County, which we are in, these numbers essentially look as described in this table. And so one of the pleasant surprises for the 2024 data set is that we can see that our target was 29, and this is one of the, since 2019, this is the first time that we have not only exceeded the target, but by a very big margin. It shows a significant drop from 34 fatalities to 21. It is a bit disappointing that the serious injury numbers are still relatively the same as they were before. However, the reduction in fatality is certainly something somewhat of a pleasant surprise. And so what we notice is that the target was 29, the actual data for 2024 estimated is 21, and which translated to 0.76 as opposed to the target of 0.95. And since we have signed on in Vision Zero, we decided to see what would it take, what percentage reduction per year it would take to get that number of 21, as well as the number of serious injury to get down to 0. And we estimated that 12% reduction per year on average is what we will need to get it down to 0 for both fatality and serious injury by 2050. And therefore, for McLennan County, the target we would like to set is based on actual data. And so 12% reduction from 21 is 18.48. That's how we arrived at that number. 0.667 is what we're expecting the target to be for the rate of fatalities per 100 million mile traveled, and the 193 serious injuries translating to about 7 serious injury rate per 100 million mile. And we're also expecting to reduce the non-motorized fatality as well as serious injury down to 20.24. Next slide. In McLean County in 24, these are the locations of all the fatal injury crashes. So this is a hypothetical or graphical representation of what we are expecting it to look like. And you notice that the grayed out top line is based on the target, but the highlighted line below is based on the actual data point, beginning at 21 as the baseline and trying to get it down to 0 by 2050 for both fatal injury target. And for serious injury, our baseline is only slightly lower than what the original target was, but our expectation again is to get that down to 0 as well by 2050. One of the highlights for this year is that we noticed that there's a total reduction of 12. In fact, 10 of that 10 reduction in fatality can be explained by simply what happened at two of the major corridors across McLennan County, the most important of I-35, which had 9 fatalities in 2022, 9 in 2023, but 4 in 2024, which is excellent and quite encouraging, even though serious injuries did not decline by as much. In fact, the 2024 number is slightly higher than 2022 number. In terms of total crashes, we are also seeing a decline from 3,624 in 2022 down to 31, down to 2,985, approximately 3,000 crashes. For US 84, similarly, fatalities went down to 0 from 5. That was the case in 2022 and 23. And the total crashes also declined from 1,900 to 1,400 in 2023, but went up slightly to 1,629. The overall fatality numbers are at 22 for 2024, which was a significant drop from 34 in 2023. But overall, when we compare it to 2022, we clearly are seeing a pleasant direction for fatalities. In each year, it has reduced by 12. For FY 2024, or not, excuse me, the calendar year 2024 fatality rate is an estimate at the point subject to confirmation and data review by TxDOT. Next slide. So our question for us is that, are we doing what it might take to achieve 0 fatality by 2050? In this particular case, as we have at Waco MPO as well as TxDOT, we have signed on to Vision Zero goals, and we are committed to using engineering, policies, programs, educational campaigns, and whatever it takes to ensure that we can get to Vision Zero target by 2050. Here are some of the efforts that we make. We have 3 years of SS4A projects that we have been using, but quite importantly, we developed the project selection criteria for MTP 2050 and explicitly evaluated the projects, whether they may allow us or help us with reducing fatalities and serious injury for all. We are also paying attention to the modal choices, the land use connection and crash hotspots, et cetera, in our analysis. And we also plan and program the projects in the MTP and TIP that contribute to accomplishments of these statewide targets. Now, these are obviously for statewide outcomes, and thereby often we do pay more attention to the TxDOT right-of-ways in those cases. However, locally, next slide. We're also paying attention to what is happening locally using the SS4A grant. We completed a comprehensive safety action plan using 2022 SS4A grant. The one in 2023 is going to undertake 6 different classes of demonstration projects to identify not only how could we do better, but develop tools, design engineering tools, so that we can inform the local roadways as well. We also received funds from TxDOT, with which we are purchasing safety speed trailer to allow the local governments in different parts to utilize that as a tool for traffic calming measures. We also participate in the TxDOT Safety Task Force that allows us to influence decision-making not only at statewide level, but also locally. So what is very important is that at a local level, we try to understand what the local concerns and the local safety-related conditions are that affect our roadways. And we also try to link the investment priorities to TxDOT safety performance goals. So we do need to tackle this issue nationally because this is not a purely local issue. And this is a recap of what we mentioned earlier, that we have identified the safety as a very important selection criteria for MTP 2050. We identify modal choices, travel time, land use connections, crash hotspots, etc. And at the same time, we have tried to make full use of SS4A. And we're also happy to that 2 of our local governments have received implementation grants for SS4A, which we are also expecting to have positive effect on safety outcomes in our region. Now we'll talk about public transportation and we'll talk about safety, and then we'll also talk about the transit asset management. Next slide. Public transportation generally is 10 times safer per mile than traveling by a car. So public transportation right off the bat is actually a much safer option, safer mode of travel than single occupancy vehicles. People use public transportation to do almost the same things as we typically do. It is an alternative mode of transportation and quite effective one. And we expect it to be without incident. However, that is not always the case. In TxDOT, in Texas case, public transit vehicle crashes kill approximately 16 people in Texas each year and injure just over 700 people. And this does not include the data on school bus incidents. Public agencies across the United States, we work to make sure that public transportation again arrive at their destination without incident. But the point of this slide really is that looking at 16 deaths per year in the state of Texas clearly means that it is not only 10 times safer, it is in fact much safer than 10 times in Texas. And 700 injury is also significantly lower than what is the case for single occupancy vehicles. Slide. So what can we do about it? Similar to earlier, we also measure the safety and severity of crashes. We try to make sense of the factors that cause public transportation accidents. And in public transportation cases, quite often it has to do with mechanical failure or sometimes to human behavior and infrastructure. We try to, we recommend the practices to effectively and proactively take care of the internal safety risk, and at the same time, try to predict and reduce the frequency of safety events across the system as well as on the public roadways. Next. So we measure them similar to the roadway fatalities as the number, the rate and severity of crashes, as well as the mechanical failures of the vehicle. The mechanical failures is the additional item of data point for public transit safety. And we set the performance target to minimize the frequency and as well as mechanical issues. Quite often, it means adjusting the vehicle maintenance and driver training programs, and also prioritizing funding for safety improvements across the system. Next slide. So in case of Waco Transit, similar to what we described earlier, we measure the number, estimate the number of fatalities per vehicle revenue miles traveled, number of serious injuries per vehicle revenue mile traveled, number of safety events, as well as number of major mechanical failures. And similar to earlier, in this case also, we apply the systems approach in which our expectation is the system-wide outcomes will improve even further. According to FAST Act, we have to better assess and maintain safety risk within the transit networks. And the way we do this is by being more effective and proactively managing the internal safety risk, predicting and reducing the frequency of safety events, and ensuring the safety improvements do guide where the funding goes. Similar to earlier, as we described, we measure fatality, serious injury, number of safety events, and number of significant mechanical failures. We typically set the performance targets annually. In case of Waco Transit, on December 17th, Waco City Council adopted the public transportation safety plan. And as we can see that most of the fatalities baseline number is 0, target is 0. Therefore, the rate baseline is 0, target is 0. Total injuries is 3, and the target is 2.6, which translates to a negligible baseline, and we're expecting it to stay as close to 0 as possible. We're expecting the safety events to decline from 3 to 2.2, and even the rate of safety events are remarkably low, and we wanted to get it down to 0. The system reliability, 32,592, which is already quite reliable, and our target is slightly higher for the next year than it was before. For the demand response safety performance, we see the same way. Fatalities are very close to 0. Injuries are 4 absolute number, and which translate into rates of very close to 0. The safety events, we are expecting it to get down to 2.8, and the reliability measures also to improve and get it down to 39,920. Next one. For the transit asset management, we assess the condition of the transit vehicles and facilities relative to what FTA defines as a state of good repair. State of good repair is a condition in which a capital asset is able to operate at a full level of performance. And we aim to make sure that the capital assets are managed effectively throughout their entire life cycles. And we also assess the progress toward meeting the targets. And at least some of the federal dollars, they have to be used to address asset conditions if targets are not being met. Next slide. In case of Waco Transit participates in the group-sponsored plan that TxDOT adopted in 2023, and this is for the period 2023 to 2026. In each case, the target is that the rolling stock is less than or equal to 15% of fleet assets operating beyond the useful life benchmark for age as established by TxDOT. 15% is also the target that are operating beyond the ULB, the useful life benchmark for equipment, and the facilities similarly need to be operating at 15% target. That 15% of them will have a condition lower than 3.0 on the term scale. The 2023-2026 group-sponsored TAM provides replacement schedule for over 4 years of rolling stock equipment and facilities, and page 6 of the group plan describes the performance targets. But to summarize it, it's 15% for the vehicles and facilities. Slide. Similar to earlier case, NPO, we spend time to understand the local safety-related conditions that do affect transit, and we also link the investment priorities to Waco Transit safety performance goals, as well as we include projects and strategies in our plans and programs to aid transit agency achieving their safety targets. Next slide. So now we will talk about the opportunities for public comment. The solicitation of comments began on January 29th, and it will continue till February 7th. Anyone can submit comments online at the link provided in this slide, as well as in the meeting material. The public informational meeting is what we are conducting at this moment. The Technical Advisory Committee will review and make its recommendation on February 6th, and we will be conducting public hearing and policy board action on February 20th, 2025. So, with any questions, comments, or ideas, please contact us. Our phone number is 254-750-5650. You can email us at mpo@wacotx.gov. You can also contact us via Facebook or LinkedIn. You can submit comment in any language, and the comment form is also accessible on the MPO website in the community engagements section. Here are contact information. Thank you. Since we do not have anyone join online, it's 5:46. Conclude the meeting at 5:46 p.m.